Okay, the time is 5 p.m. Call to order. The Bastrop EDC Board reserves the right to convene into executive session at any time during the meeting regarding any agenda item in compliance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, Chapter 551, Government Code. I'm not seeing any public comments. No, so do we have any public comments? No? Okay, we will head to item regular business, 3.1. Approval of meeting minutes of the Bastrop EDC regular board meeting of May 21, 2018. And this will be on page 3 of your packet.
Move to approve.
Second. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? The minutes are approved. Item 3.2. Acceptance of the Bastrop EDC's financial summary report for period ending May 31st, 2018. This is on page 6. So, Angela?
Okay, so as of May 31st, the EDC is 2/3 through the budget year, and the EDC is showing revenue over expenses in the amount of $320,000 and $320,799. Whoops, lost my notes. Okay, on the sales tax, we're still doing well at $99,848 over what we originally budgeted for the fiscal year, or about 6.8% above. On expenditures, we are under budget by $74,452, or approximately 7.74%. And the total debt obligation now includes the 2018 bond issuance. And if you have any questions about that, Tracy Waldron is here to answer it. And of course, next on the agenda is the amendment to that resolution.
Just one question on the sales tax revenues. There's a blip in May, and that's a one-time event, I understand.
I can speak to that. When the sales tax comes through, they do a true-up each month, and that was a month where there were several companies that paid up, and so you know, it fluctuates somewhat. One of the examples that Tracy has given us before is a company may do work in Bastrop, maybe come fix somebody's air conditioner, but they may be out of Round Rock, and so at first pass, Round Rock may collect that sales tax, and then when they realize where the work was done, then we would get that sales tax, but it may take them a while to catch that as they're going through their audit. And we specifically had a couple of companies, organizations that trued up and paid in sales tax, so it was a one-time blip. I think it's awesome when we get extra money. It makes Ms. Waldron very nervous when it's not systematic and expected, which you as an equal CPA
I would agree with Tracy.
Yes. So she has access to more of the numbers, and that's what happened.
I make a motion to accept the financials. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? They are accepted. On to item 3.3. Consider all matters incident and related to amending resolution number R 2018-0004, adopted on May 21st, 2018, authorizing the issuance of Bastrop Economic Development Corporation sales tax revenue bonds, Series 2018, including the adoption of a resolution pertaining thereto. I'll turn it over to Jason.
All right, Chair, members, good evening. Good to be with you again. You only thought you would put this to bed, so I'm here before you tonight to talk about an amendment, and this is an amendment that was brought about by the bidding bank. And so not knowing exactly how much you've heard, I'll try to be mindful of your time, but I put together a summary of the bid timeline that I put out in front of each one of your positions, and I'll just go through that again, being brief. One thing I thought that was important was really to establish again the time frame in which all this happened. So as you can see there on Monday, April 30th, that's when we sent the term sheet to potential bidders. And we asked these different banks to basically provide a bid. And we gave them a date certain in which to do that. And the things that we do on that term sheet is we laid out exactly what the bonds would include and in this case would not include. And there was certainly no mention of a debt service reserve fund. So each bank that got the term sheet knew that there was no reserve fund included in there. So banks were also requested to submit any questions they would have to Commerce Bank, which was the placement agent. There has to be that intermediary between me as well as the bidding banks. On Friday, May 11th, Amegy Bank, which was the winning bidder, submitted a list of questions, and one of the things that they did ask about was the inclusion of a debt service reserve fund. And as you can see there on Sunday, May 13th, the placement agent responded that there would be no debt service reserve fund. On Thursday, May 17th, that's when we received the bids. We received 5 bids, and Amegy Bank, as you recall, had the lowest bid at a 3.39% interest rate. One of the other key components that they had in there is that the EDC could pay off the bonds at any point, so callable at any time. No provision, and this is one of the key components, no provision was included in their bid for a debt service reserve fund. So it's 339, callable anytime. That was the end of the story. Just to give you an idea, the cover bid was at 3.60%. That was about $25,000 higher in debt service than the winning bid. And then again, one of those key components is they would not allow the board to pay off that debt until 2025. So as you can see there on the 21st, the EDC board approved the bond sale. I believe it was the next night that the council then approved basically the board's actions. On June 5th, Amegy Bank contacted me and essentially said, hey, we provided this bid and we forgot to put in a debt service reserve fund. And I said, well, I appreciate that and I'm sorry for your error, but we expect you to honor your bid. And to make a very long story short, they basically said they could not do that. Their credit committee required a reserve fund. The banker, to his credit, basically said, look, this is on me. But again, they couldn't do anything. So we spent the next, through, I guess, last week trying to come up with some different ideas of how we could solve that. And I was pretty steadfast in that the EDC board, again, approved this without a debt service reserve fund. They did try a couple of different things. In my opinion, one of the things they wanted to do was going to constrain your future flexibility as far as being able to issue debt. I wasn't interested in that. Another thing that they wanted to do is actually increase the par amount of the bonds, but decrease the interest rate. And basically get to a net wash, and ultimately the Attorney General's office would not allow for that. So in talking with Angela and talking with Tracy, one of the things that they did mention is that you do have a fund balance, you do have funds that are there that are basically unused, and that if the board elected to, that you could set that aside as a debt service reserve fund balance. So what that would mean is the debt service reserve fund amount is $108,127.42. So you would take that, you would set that aside, and you would set that aside for as long as these Series 2018 bonds are outstanding. Okay, so you do have to set that, so it's not coming from bond proceeds, but it would be money that you would have that, again, is setting aside, or that's set aside right now, but that would be set aside for repayment on those bonds in the event that for whatever reason your sales tax revenues didn't come in and you couldn't make timely principal and interest payments. I tried to explain to the banker how absolutely remote, if not impossible, that was, but again, for whatever reason, their credit committee didn't see it that way. So I come to you tonight asking for your blessing on that to set aside those funds. If you do that, we have been told by Amegy Bank that they will accept that. We have had to push the closing back because, again, we'll have to take your approval, assuming you approve it. We'll have to take that and we'll have to send that down to the Texas Attorney General's office. If you do that, what we have is we schedule closing on July 3rd, and that's when the funds would be delivered to the EDC. So again, that's my presentation. I'm not happy with it in the sense that, again, in my opinion, they provided a bid. It was not a conditioned bid. Having said that, it is still the best bid. And I do think it, one, gives you the lowest interest rate, and two, it provides that future flexibility. But again, that's my report. I'd certainly be happy to answer any questions you may have.
I have 2 quick questions.
Yes, ma'am.
One, is that money being set aside, can it count as a part of the reserve fund, or does it have to be above and beyond the reserve fund?
The money that you would set aside is the reserve fund.
So it's okay, so we're essentially
a
already doing that
restricted-
anyway. It's a restricted
There are
reserve.
two reserve funds, so I think he's talking about the reserve fund for the bond. I think you're talking about the reserve fund in our budget, right?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am, I'm sorry, those are two
So I
separate.
guess that's more, I guess, for Tracy. I don't know if I was thinking the same thing, just,
Yeah, so when Jason called me, basically, you have a very healthy fund balance. You have a lot of available funds there. All this is doing is on the books, it will actually show restricted, committed for a bond reserve, 108,000. And so it's just basically carving 108,000 out of what you already have sitting out there and putting a label on it. So we felt like that was something that would really not be an issue as far as you not having those funds, you have them.
I think the question is,
And you've
though,
always had
there's
them.
something in the budget process where we have to maintain 25% of a reserve
And
balance.
and you have that, and you have
So
fund balance above
we don't
that.
have to make that 425,000 or 430. It's still, is that like a city
So
statute or something?
your reserve is based on how much your budget expenditures are. That's where that 25% comes from.
Correct me if I'm wrong on the number, but I want to say since I've been on this board, we've been hovering about 29 to 33% in reserve balance, so there is some buffer there. Not to say that we want to skim that, but there is some buffer there that we haven't even come close to that 25%
You would have to consider this reserve in the future when you're looking at using some of those fund balances for projects. But it's going to be set aside, and it's going to be very clear that those funds are set aside for the bond reserve.
So, and I apologize because I'm a lot of things, but I'm not a CPA. So when I know that we have to reserve 25% of our operating expense, I guess what I'm asking is this reserve, can that be a part of that 25%, or it's a separate pot of money?
It should be separate.
And all you're saying is,
It'll be
we got
later.
lots of money, it's just a separate pot of money and we still have it, but we would still then be required to have the reserve for the operating expense, and that would be completely separate from this 100,000 plus that we're talking about.
So the real reserve would be the 25% plus 100,000.
Yes.
When you're looking at spending money.
Available funds to spend.
available cash.
And then the second question, and Jason, I don't know whether it's you or Tracy, if BEDC approves this, does it have to go back to council, or is this a minor enough adjustment that it doesn't go back to council?
I believe that in bond council in discussing this was more comfortable if it went back to council as well.
I wondered if that was another reason why it was July 3rd, because you go back to council on the 26th, I think.
Right, and I think really the main thing is just getting it through the Attorney General's office. But I think, because bond counsel and I discussed, and we thought it was a material change that certainly you needed to be aware of before we even got to the point of coming up with this.
From reading the backup and reading the papers, it seems like we went out to bid at a very good time, because interest rates are going up.
That's correct.
So.
That's correct.
And I want to go, and I'll let Sam chime in. I know Sam did a lot of legwork on the back end and a very thorough follow-through. So Sam, if you have any comments or any additional notes for the board, it'd be great.
No, I just don't know in past practices, like bonds with the water district, the reserve is pretty normal. So, and I don't think I asked you, but I asked our attorney, the bond attorney, whether specifically went and said, "Are you sure there's no reserve on this thing?" She said, "No, no reserve."
Well, and again, I've done economic development corporations without a reserve fund, and I certainly think that your finances are strong enough that we didn't need one. And I have no problem with the reserve fund. I just wish it would have come on the front end, is where it should have come.
I'm not a CPA either, but a couple of questions here. It seems to me, number one, and correct me if I'm wrong, it was their mistake.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so they're asking us to set aside $108,000 and change.
Yes, sir.
For the life of the bond,
Yes, sir.
which is, 20 years? Is that what we're doing? I'm sorry? 15 years.
Yes, sir.
So while we are, and I'm glad that we're in a healthy position, and we always have been, but let's just keep that in mind, that for 15 years, we don't have the use of that money. And we don't know what other projects are going to come out or what economic environment's going to be 15 years or between now and 15 years. So while it's like, well, it's no big deal, we got the money, we can do it. Why do we have to pay for their mistake? What kind of, is there anything else that we could do in order to
We
mitigate
don't
that.
have to accept this. If we don't accept it, we could go to the next bidder, which is a higher interest rate, or we could rebid the whole process.
I understand that. It just seems to me that if a service provider makes a mistake, it seems to me the service provider should come up with a solution that doesn't cost the client.
I completely agree, and the one thing I would say is, that's why I was so frustrated. I've been doing this almost 20 years, and I've never seen it. No, but I just want you to understand how rare it is in my industry, because I've made mistakes, my firm has made mistakes where we step up and you do the right thing. And in this case, I felt like that's what should have been done, but that wasn't given as an option. And again, if we were in a situation where either the lower bidder had the cover bid had a more equitable bid, then I might be sitting here telling you something different. But again, I think it is the lowest bid with the most flexibility. And as you pointed out, interest rates have gone up. So I think we would be in a situation where we'd have to approach and start the process over in a higher interest rate environment.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
We can win the battle and lose the war.
So I move to approve?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tracy, staff, Sam, thank you for diligence on this. I know this was a curveball for everybody. Going on to 3.4. Consideration, discussion, and possible action regarding a presentation from KSA engineers concerning remediation on the 921 Main Street project. This is on page 26. And Ty? Correct.
My name's Ty Womble. I'm a civil engineer with KSA Engineers. Does everybody here have a little bit of understanding of the 921 property? Okay. I don't know if this PowerPoint has some of the. I guess this is control. Okay. Sorry, I don't have it pulled up here, but basically, in summary, back in April, May, we did an engineering study of the site. It was basically just to review the current conditions and the structural integrity of the walls to the exterior of the site. 921 is just a lot, it's empty. In short, the recommendation is if the board decides to make improvements, it would be strictly for shoring up moisture penetration or preventing moisture penetration. The estimated cost of construction would be anywhere of $40,000 to $65,000. My recommendation as an engineer, if this is just a temporary solution for 6 months to a year until you have a tenant take over that site, would be to forego those improvements. If the ballpark estimated value of that lot's $500,000, maybe $400,000, I don't think it makes sense to pay a 10% premium just for a 6-month period or a year to make those improvements. So, but if you were to improve it, you felt very risk averse, then you can coat the exterior walls that would seal the tenants next door, and you can make improvements to the base of the exterior walls with like a concrete curb, and it would prevent water penetration. But at this point, it seems pretty negligible, and so anyway, did anyone get to read the report? Or okay, any questions or?
Ty, you're saying if it was 6 months to a year, is there a point that you would say we should go ahead and make the improvements?
I would say, yeah, if you were going to hold it for 5 or 10 years and it would sit dormant for that period, sure, but for a half year, I just don't think it's justifiable. So if someone buys it, or the counterparts that move forward with the property, the cost to make the improvements at that point when it's built out would probably be cut in half. You know, part of that is if you got a contractor doing 40,000 versus 750,000, cost drops significantly. So I would say, unless it was a long holding period, I don't think it's justified.
The caps that you designed, they make perfect sense, but I was thinking if it's a building, that's the first thing that's coming off. So, you know, the curb, that's the first thing that's going to go away. And
yeah, it's temporary. It's not necessarily it's not a nuisance moving forward, but it's not necessarily a asset either. The biggest engineering solutions that will occur that will help is that when it's built out, the new roof will be integrated with the existing adjacent properties so that it'll all flash correctly and everything will be solved. It's a pretty flat site. It's in the report. It does drain slightly towards the street. So, you know, if there was like a Hurricane Harvey hit, it would drain out to the street. It's not just sit there and inundate the neighbors. So, that's about it.
So speaking of Hurricane Harvey, if Hurricane Harvey were to come, the repairs are negligible, but tell us what's the worst thing that's going to happen if we really get hit by inclement weather.
Yeah, if a hurricane loitered over Bastrop downtown or the remnants of it for 48, 72 hours like Harvey, then you would, if all the drainage system of downtown Bastrop, if that backs up, then yeah, you could have standing water of, 12 inches to maybe 18 inches. It'd have to be analyzed. We didn't do a drainage study of the entire downtown drainage system, but my gut feeling is that most of the storm drains, I feel like, are running off to some nearby channel. I don't see the same problems that would happen like they did in Houston. But if it did happen, and let's say there's 12 inches of standing water, then basically adjacent tenants would have potentially their offices flooded, and the first 12 inches or 24 inches of wall would have to be removed. Interior drywall, the structural masonry would be fine. So, and that's what happened in Houston. Just a lot of the first 24, 48 inches of drywall was removed, and yeah.
I just want a clarification. You said just a little while ago that you would recommend that if we're not going to do anything for the next 6 months, that we don't make any repairs whatsoever. Is that correct?
Yeah. So if the property is just going to sit vacant for 6 months to say 12 months, the recommendation is, unless you just have a burning desire to spend $50,000, I would think it's money better spent.
So does that match up with your letter here that you are actually recommending the repair? Because I'm a little confused to what you just said and then what the letter said.
What the study was, what we were paid to do is what is the cheapest solution. But here, speaking frankly, my advice is save your money unless you want to spend it.
The scope of the work was to, what would it cost? And give us your recommendation on that, and then, so that's what we have.
No, right, I actually just wanted to hear him say that. I want to be sure that it was, just. Exactly, thank you.
And the other thing is, if the property moves in 9 months, and by the time you get contractors spun up, get it to bid, et cetera, you're going to lose 3 months. So, I mean, a lot of the times it's going to be water in the bridge anyway. So, anyway, all right. I'll leave my cards here in case you want to contact me.
Perfect. Anyone else have any questions?
Thank you, Ty.
Thank you, Ty. Going on to 3.5, consideration, discussion, and possible action regarding an update by Stone Cobalt on the 921 Main Street project. This is on page 41. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chair, Mayor, members. Guy Dudley, Stone Development Group, part of the Stone Cobalt effort, I guess, for 921 Main, and I guess that worked out really well for Ty to be right here. So great news, since I saw y'all last. We now have a letter of intent for a downstairs tenant for the property. So we got a letter of intent from them about a month ago, and that's looking good, and supposedly we are in negotiations with the upstairs tenant. So that's how we can move forward. Depending on how things go with the upstairs tenant, to answer Ty's, I guess the questions y'all had with KSA engineers, best case scenario, we get this thing buttoned up, move forward, get through Bastrop, city of Bastrop, we might have construction by Thanksgiving. So to help take care of that issue, to move forward and do something with that space and take care of those tenants. So that, quickly, that's our leasing update. A little excited. Thank you. We're not there yet, but I appreciate that. Yes, sir, to step forward. So, yes. Do y'all have any questions? Kid in the candy store right now.
I'm excited for you.
Well, thank you very much.
We like it when people bring good news. Thank you. What do you think the chances are on finalizing?
Up to me, 100%. Probably pretty good.
The one comment that I would offer, actually two comments. One, if you find that you get the second LOI and you're ready to do something, I think that this board's happy to call an emergency meeting to approve whatever needs to be approved. We do not think that you have to wait until the next regularly scheduled meeting. Is that agreeable, board? And
Yes.
Secondly, I know that you're aware that for the city, we do pre-development, so we have all the people in the room and we'll do everything we can, as we do all developers, to help expedite permit process and make sure expectations are known up front, so we try to have as smooth a process as we possibly can.
Yes, ma'am. So we're all on the same page.
Right.
Great. No further questions. Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Happy to meet tomorrow on that.
Absolutely. Tomorrow morning, let us know. We'll be there. 3.6, consideration, discussion, and possible action regarding the EDC's FY 2018-2019 draft budget and budget schedule timeline. This is on page 42, and I believe everyone has the budget draft in front of them.
We received that last night from Sean. So that is draft 3.0. His recommendation was to take it home, look at it, and come back with questions, since we haven't really had a chance to go through it yet. I think that's the same thing we did last year. It's not that unusual, just to get the kind of a budget preview, if you will. Staff would like to know if you want to go ahead and have a special budget workshop so that we can concentrate on strictly the budget numbers and not, some of the other things that have to.
I would say yes, being the fact that we have some new members here to go through that process, just make sure we're going through an item, looking at each itemization and where those funds are going. So
Okay.
Most definitely.
Perfect. We'll ask Kathy to get with everybody tomorrow and see about a date then. Okay, thank you.
Just a point, Angela and I went through version 2, in a lot of depth, hence version 3. But there weren't a lot of issues. It's pretty straightforward. I think it was pretty easy to go through. So I'm not sure you need a special meeting, but you might want to look at it first, and then why don't you decide, Cam, after you look at it, whether you think we really need a special
Why
meeting?
don't we do this? Why don't we all agree we'll spend a couple of days to look at it, and then field any questions to staff, and if the questions are, more than what we can answer, then we should all get together. But if there are one or two questions that either staff or Sam can answer, I think, then unnecessary. Is everyone fine with that?
Yeah, and we all went through this last year.
Right.
We were here.
Okay, fair enough.
And you just handed this to us, but you're going to put it in the Dropbox?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. The time is 5:30. The Bastrop EDC Board of Directors will meet in a closed executive session pursuant to the Texas Government Code, Chapter 551, to discuss the following. 1, Section 551.071, consultation with attorney, contract with Bastrop Fine Arts Guild. Section 551.071, consultation with attorney, contract with American Tower Lease. Section 551.071, consultation with attorney. 551.072, deliberation about the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property, Kershaw parking lot lease contract. Number 4, Section 551, consultation with attorney. 551.072, deliberation about the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property. 551.087, deliberation regarding economic development negotiations, contract with Granite and Stone LLC. Number 5, Section 551.071, consultation with attorney. 551.072, deliberation about the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property. 551.087, deliberation regarding economic development negotiations, 921 Main Street project. And number 6, Section 551.074, personnel matters, executive director position. The time is 7:42. The Bastrop EDC Board of Directors will reconvene into open sessions to discuss and consider and or take any action necessary related to the executive sessions noted herein. In reference to number 1, Bastrop Fine Arts Guild has been notified of their breach of contract and remains in breach until the BEDC receives a response. This response is expected shortly in order to cure the breach. Number 3, there's no action on the Kershaw parking lot lease, which ends on November 12th, 2018.
Number 4, we move to authorize Denton Navarro and Cam Chavez to present the performance agreement to Granite Stone.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Carries. Number 5, BEDC Board has given council direction to draft an LOI with 921 Bastrop LLC for the chair to sign. No action on number 6. The time is 7:44 and we are adjourned.